Hello and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else happens to pop into our head. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, joining me today is Chris Carlo. So, Chris, if you could, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got interested into craft beer.
Yeah, so it's sort of a long story. I got into craft beer years ago because my dad started bringing home different and better beers after work. Like we'd both be, working in the summertime between university years, and it used to be a lot of Moosehead and Heineken, Crack Canoe, and stuff like that. And very slowly, we're like, oh, the LCBO has these different beers, or a beer store's got a couple different ones, and we tried a few things, and then started liking stuff that wasn't just domestic lagers, basically. And then fast forward a few years, I graduate university, and I'm bar backing at a restaurant, and we're having a grand opening event, and there's a beer rep there, and I was talking to him like, hey man, so how did you get into being a beer rep for a brewery? Because you can't go to school for that, really. There's no course, there's no program. And he's like, honestly, I started volunteering at this brewery, and then they needed someone to do this job, and they're like, hey, do you want to get money for what you do? And he's like, yes, I do. I'm like, oh, that's excellent. So a week later, I was sitting at home, between bar shifts, and I was opening up my laptop. I search Ottawa craft breweries, and I get a list of 8 or so that are within kind of the city limits, because I'm like, I don't want to trek out to the ass end of everywhere just to volunteer my time at a brewery. So I emailed a few of them. I said, hey, my name's Chris. I'm passionate about craft beer, because at this point I was really into drinking tasty beers, and I'm like, I'm passionate about craft beer. I'm a bar back at the time, so I'm familiar with changing kegs, cleaning lines, kind of the basic sort of stuff. I'm like, do you need any help at the brewery? I'd love to come in a couple days a week for a few hours and help you guys do your stuff. And then the brewery that got back to me that was the closest to me was Waller Street Brewing, which is in downtown Ottawa. Little spot, really, really excellent beers, cool little, hole in the wall, speakeasy type brewery. And I started volunteering there for a few months, and this was kind of like October, November, December of 2015. And they say to me in December, like, hey, Chris, in the new year, we're going to start paying someone to do your job. Do you want money? And I said, well, yes, I'd love that. That would be excellent. And so that was how I became their very first employee. And then from there, I worked there for a few years, and then I got more into actually being a sales rep, territory manager, selling the beer. So I worked for different brewery, a sales agency. I've done some actual mobile canning as well. So I always tell people, they're like, oh, what have you done? It's like, I can do anything except brew the beer, because science is hard.
Science isn't that hard when you're making beer, though.
Well, for me, it's just over my head.
I got you. And fair enough. Not everybody's got the skill set that's required. Like, there's a lot of things that I can't do. Brewing beer happens to be one of the things I can do.
Amazing. Yeah. And so just different things. And then I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out, but I'm going to be actually starting at Broadhead here as their new Ottawa territory manager next week. So I'm pretty excited for that. A new chapter, but selling awesome beer and sharing it with, a great community, which is always really exciting.
Yeah. This episode actually won't air until September. So you will be a few weeks into your new job by the time.
I will either be well into it or already fired.
Right. One of the two. Hey, yeah. All right. Well, let's get right into what we're talking about today. So today's beer style that we're hoping to stay on track with, but if we don't, it's just par for the course. Today's beer style is amber ale. So, amber ales are actually, believe it or not, if you don't know this, they are a member of the pale ale family. The difference being that they add caramel or crystal malts to the standard pale ale recipe to give it the depth of color, and to give it the bigger body. It's been around as a style since the 1700s. Pale ales themselves got really popular in the early 1700s. Other beers that also happen to fall into the pale ale family are Bière de Garde, blonde ales, believe it or not, English bitters, IPAs, and Irish Reds. They're all part of the same family. They're all, they all use the same base, and they just change out or add a couple things to it. In the old days, back in the 1700s, 1800s, and into the early 1900s, breweries often use the term pale ale to designate the beers as having been made with lighter malts or made with malts that were dried with a coke-fired kiln. Customers tended to call them bitters, which is where the English bitter comes from. They used the term bitter because the beers were more bitter than stouts and porters and things like that. So that's kind of where the name comes from. It's kind of interesting. So for color, color of your typical amber ale should be a copper color to sometimes into a dark reddish brown. It should be fairly clear, but having a bit of haze in it is not uncommon. You should see a fair amount of carbonation. So when you pour it into a glass, it shouldn't be like a barrel aged beer where there's barely any carbonation. You should have a fair amount of activity in there and things like that. Amber ales tend to be fairly mild on the alcohol taste. Like when you're drinking it, you don't get that astringent from the alcohol. Depending on if they're what they're doing to it or how high they've taken the ABV, it could be medium to no astringency to it. So yeah, hops typically they use. There's actually several variety of hops that get used depending on which member of the family they're using, but they all tend to have that citrusy flavor to them. So other than that, let's open a beer and talk about it. So I'm having Skeleton Park's Amber 6.6.
That is a great beer.
I recently discovered these guys. I was looking for beers to buy, different beers, and there's a website called obdi.ca.
Love them. Love that site. Use it all the time. I send it whenever friends of mine are posting on Facebook. Oh, I don't know where to get beer from. I want to get some delivered. I just post that link. I'm like, check this out. There you go. It's the only resource you need.
So I literally opened up the page and took my mouse scroll wheel and scrolled it, and it stopped at Skeleton Park. I'm like, okay, let's see what these guys have. Perfect. And they happen to have a mixed flat that you can buy. So it had their English, it had the Amber, it had the Bohemian Pilsner, and it had the Soul Juice, their IPA.
Yeah.
So all solid beers so far, but I have to say. The Amber is really, really good, but my favorite is the traditional English beer, which is in the same family.
Exactly, yeah. I'm drinking the Amber Ale from Broadhead. This is actually one I've always really liked, even before they offered me a job. Back when I was in university, and this is not even that long ago, like I was in school from 2011 to 2015, because I'm a younger guy.
Much younger than I am.
It used to be called the Grindstone Amber. That's not the old name for it. And then I guess they got some new brewers and changed up a lot of their branding, which I think honestly looks really nice right now. But it tastes just great. It's smooth as heck. It's just one I've always enjoyed. So yeah, cheers.
All right, cheers. All right, so. What's your first impression when you take that first drink?
I love the really just warm malty flavor that Ambers have. Every sip, I mean, especially like really good ones, every sip is just cozy. It's like just makes you feel, you know what I mean?
Yep. No, yeah. So the Skeleton Park Amber, when you bring it up to your face, you get a nice, a really light citrus, fruity smell to it. And that's not uncommon for an amber. You should have some light fruity aromas or esters as they are. There shouldn't be any phenol smells at all, so you shouldn't have any off smells at all. But yeah, it's got a very slight citrusy, fruity aroma to it. And then you put it in your mouth and you just get that big hit of malt, that sweet malty backbone, which is absolutely fantastic. It leaves a slight coating in your mouth as you're drinking it, as you finish it. You get that little bit of bitter on the end. I mean, it's nice. It's not like so bitter like a lot of the bigger IPAs and things are. It's a very understated, just at the back, basically it hits you in the back of the mouth going, "Hey buddy, I'm here."
Hello. No, exactly. I mean, for me, I will drink almost any kind of beer. I'm usually happy with most styles. But really malt forward styles is what I generally prefer, because it's just easy drinking, smooth, tasty. And I love the bready flavor, whether it's something like a Pilsner or a Blonde where it sort of tastes like pretzels, or, more of an amber, which just tastes like warm, fresh bread, in a way. I love that. For me, it's just smooth sipping.
When I lived in the States, there was a local brewery called Prairie Street that made their own take on the amber, and they used a bit more rye malt in it. They used a bit of rye malt in it. So when you put it in your mouth, you got that breadiness, but you got that little bit of spiciness from the rye. And it was literally like putting a fresh piece of dark rye bread in your mouth, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, rye ales are one of my favorite styles of beer. They don't get made very often, but when you get one, I always get so excited.
It's pretty funny that there aren't more rye ales, because rye is like one of the biggest crops for Canada. Yeah.
I think it's just some people do it sometimes around September and October, like it's some treat for the fall. So I try to hunt them down whenever I know it's in season.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to take a bigger sip.
Oh, yeah.
So now that my mouth has kind of acclimatized to the beer, not only do you get that breadiness, you get that caramel flavor in there, mm-hmm. and it's like you put it in there, you get that hit of that sweet malt, and then the caramel hits you, and then you get that kind of breadiness with it. So it's like it's almost like having a sweet roll in your mouth.
It's sweet without being too sweet, because I'm not a big guy for sweets. I'm not a huge dessert guy. I'm more of a savory snacks. Like, give me a bag of chips, it'll be gone, in a minute. But I like the sweetness that the caramel kind of like malts and the flavoring from the ambers gives, because it's like just a little treat without being, tasting like a muffin or cake or something like that.
Yep. So interesting note, because ambers use a more roasted malt than your typical pale ales. If you're going to pair it with food, it pairs well with anything that goes on the barbecue, mm-hmm. because the caramel notes in the beer work well with the caramelized proteins and sugars that are in your burgers, in your ribs, in your Montreal smoked meat, your steak, whatever it is you're pulling off your barbecue. Chances are it's going to go well with this. And I can't say that I disagree, because amber ales are one of the ones that we tend to have around when we're doing big cookouts and things like that.
To date, I have never grilled without having a beer in my hand as well, because I think scientifically, if you're not having a beer or at least a drink while you're barbecuing, it makes the food taste bad. And I think that is science, and that is science that I do understand.
I think you're right. That's got to be a scientific fact somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't risk it.
Neither would I. Yeah. I mean, I'm also the guy that rides around on my lawn tractor with a Nickelbrook Cause and Effect in my hand, because it's a lawnmower beer.
Well, that's why they have cup holders.
That's right. I mean, if they didn't expect you to have a beer, they wouldn't have a whole beer holder on the side.
Exactly.
So, serving temperature for amber. Typical serving temperature should be between 7 and 13 degrees Celsius. That's 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit for my friends who use freedom units. Traditionally, the glassware that you should actually use for an amber is a tulip glass, believe it or not. Secondarily, they say the no-nick pint, which is the pint with the bubble in the middle.
Like the English style pint glass, like you have regular pub? Yeah.
Do you know why it has that bubble in it?
That has something to do with the I want to say like the CO2, I believe, like just like, oh no.
No, you know what it actually is? They designed it so that if it falls over, it doesn't nick the rim. The name is No Nick.
Oh,
No Nick Pint.
I was thinking too hard about it. It's really
yeah,
it's there in the name.
I honestly, I always thought it was something to do with it. And the other reason is that bubble helps when your hands are wet and you've had a few for you not to drop it. Unlike the standard, the cylindrical pint glass, which when it gets wet gets slippery and can crash to the ground.
I developed a foolproof method for that. So whenever if I'm walking around a bar, you don't hold it like this. I hold it like this. So I have my pinky underneath, and I'll never drop the glass. So I'm always balancing.
That's how you hold your phone too, so you don't drop
exactly.
it. So, I mean,
exactly.
yeah. I tend to drink as many beers as I can out of. I've got this as a Tiku glass. So
I got a few of those guys as well. I like them.
These are a good all-around beer glass because of their shape. They allow the beer to breathe, and because it goes up at the top, it funnels the aromas up to your nose as you're bringing it to your face. So
I'm using. I love any glass with a handle, and this is one of my favorite. I know it's like your Pilsner style glass or that kind of stuff, but anything I can just hold like this. I love the dimples on it. It's just one of my favorites.
It's like an Oktoberfest style glass. Just a little one.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple Steins on the shelf over here too, but they would have been way too much room in.
Yeah, I've actually got a 2-liter Stein that came from Oktoberfest in Munich.
Wow. Yeah,
it's fantastic. Well, they don't want to be coming around every 5 minutes.
No, you just fill this up. You're good for the next 30 minutes.
10. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just the alcoholic in me talking.
You bring the big straw.
Yeah, bring the big straw. just don't do this because it's like this big around. Yep. All right. So this is typically the part of the show. We're at the halfway point where I ask you, what are some things that you're into? What are some things that you're doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, besides working in the craft beer industry, which is just the best thing ever, I love to rock climb now that the gyms are open again. It's always great getting out, scaling some walls. That's one thing I really enjoy doing. You also feel like you really earned a beer when your entire body's sore afterwards because you've been hanging upside down for 30 minutes and you can't move your fingers because all the grip strength is gone. I also one thing I really like to do, and I hope you don't mind me saying a show. I have a movie podcast that I do with a couple good friends of mine, where we watch old movies and basically recast them with modern actors. Like if it was made today, as opposed to 20, 30 years ago, who would be in the movie? Because you wouldn't have Paul Newman. Oh, he's dead, so he wouldn't be in any movies today. But if you're watching stuff like that, it's like okay, so we did one really old one where we did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's like, well, Clint Eastwood's not a cowboy anymore. So if they were going to make a cowboy movie like that, who would be Clint Eastwood in that movie? So it's a really fun thought exercise that we do. We try to be entertaining and funny with it. We get mostly good reviews, so that's positive. It's called Cinema Swap because we're swapping the actors, but yeah, so that's fun. I love that. I noticed you got like a big D&D screen on the wall back there behind you.
That is my pour wall for what's on tap in my my brewing space here. So once upon a time, I started a brewery, and it didn't go anywhere because I didn't have the money that I didn't know was fully required. So that is actually the logo from the failed brewery. That is Critical Hit Brewing's logo. I still brew, and I still have all the recipes, and I still do all that. I just give it away now to try to sell it.
I love the D&D inspired theme there because I also like to play that with my friends when we're allowed to, get together. I'm a big fan of that. It's kind of a little bit of everything, going down to the rock gym or the brewery or the D&D cave, wherever we want to play, pretty standard. Nothing. I guess I'm just pretty basic.
No. What's funny is I've been playing D&D for 36 years. 38 years.
I love it. Like I'm a big video game guy, but I also love really good stories and the role playing aspect of the different stuff. And I mean, D&D is the original role playing game, and all of the video games that we like to play these days, the you know like the framework of them, the base of them is pretty much just D&D rules. Your different classes, whether you hit or not on attacks, blah blah blah. Every time I play stuff like stuff like Skyrim now, or anything like even Mass Effect, stuff like that, where it's just D&D in space. It's all reminds me of the mechanics. That's the word I was looking for. The mechanics of D&D, which is always really fun. So I really enjoyed playing that, and just creating and telling good stories is always very exciting as well. Such a fun game.
And your podcast about movies, about the movies with different actors, it's pretty funny. Is I used to help a friend of mine who does a podcast about movies and media called The Hollywood Outsider, and they had a spinoff of their show for several years called Remake This Movie Right. It was a similar premise, so it was like, you take a movie and you say, well, who should have been cast in this because it didn't work with these people, or these would have been better choices. So very similar. So it
is very similar. I'll have to check that out. That sounds a lot of fun. Like I thought of it one day while I was in the middle of a long canning run at a brewery north of Montreal. And I thought to myself, if they made Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring right now, it was 2020 at the time, but like if they made it right now, you're not casting any of those actors to be in that movie, because they're all too old for. I mean, maybe you would get the same guy for Gandalf, Ian McKellen, because he looks the exact same as he did 20 years ago.
Right.
But other than that, like none of those guys would be in that movie. So if you wanted to make Lord of the Rings today, who the heck would be in Lord of the Rings? And I was like racking my brain for a bit while I was standing there, and I asked my coworker, and I posted on Facebook and got like 30 comments, and people this and that, all these different actors. And I had been wanting to start up a podcast for a while, because I love podcasts. They're like TV shows for me, where I try to catch them every week, the ones that I listen to. And I thought of that idea. I'm like, I think this concept is unique enough, because there's a ton of movie podcasts out there where people just review movies or talk about film history and culture and all that jazz. And I'm not a big enough movie head to know much about film history, or really willing to do that much research for that.
So I'm hearing that you're lazy, is what you're saying.
I think it's work smarter, not harder, is the phrase that comes up. But I thought,
okay,
it's a thing you would chat with your buddies about after a couple beers, sitting at the bar. It's like, oh yeah, I was watching Blade Runner the other day, and I guess they did remake that, and they cast Ryan Gosling to be the new Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford was still in that movie. But it's sort of that idea, like, if we're watching, what did we do? We just did. We did one on Legally Blonde a little while ago, which is honestly a great movie. It still holds up. And we were thinking, like, is there even any actress right now who could do that as well as Reese Witherspoon? The answer is no, but we hoped we came close enough with the picks that we made. And, we talk about the movies and try to make some jokes and be nominally entertaining with it. But it is a ton of fun. And we've been really lucky to have some truly excellent guest appearances as well, like actual stand-up comedians, other podcasters who I really admire, and it's been really fun to I pitched the idea to them, like, hey, listen, this is the show, if you got an hour and a half next week, do you want to watch a movie and talk about it with us? And they're like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So we've had a number of really cool people, and from Canada down in the States, LA, Chicago, like kind of all over the place, and people who are like way funnier than us, who get paid to be funny. So it's really a treat. Yeah, exactly. Us amateurs. But it's been a ton of fun. It's obviously a lot of work, but it's something we like to do. You just get to watch movies, and sometimes movies I've never even seen before. And that's a nice thing for me. I have to, excuse to watch the classics. Yep.
Yeah. I'm a big movie buff. I'm a big TV buff. I'm your classic all around nerd. I mean, I play D&D, I play computer games, I watch movies.
We'll have to have you on sometime, Rob.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I've watched my fair share of movies. I mean, I was just talking with a friend of mine. We were talking about Nicolas Cage has a new movie coming out, Prisoners of the Ghost House or something like that.
I thought it was one called Pig. Is that
no? Pig's already out.
Oh, okay. I heard it's pretty good.
I mean, you go in with low expectations these days with Nick Cage. But I've got a whole section of my movie library that I call the Nick Cage rabbit hole. It's every Nick Cage movie, good, bad, or otherwise. I mean, and there's a lot that fall into that bad or otherwise category.
Oh yeah, I think that would be a good way to slowly drive somebody insane. Is just here like, okay, here's 12 movies. You can watch them in any order, and it's varying from like good Nick Cage to just, what the hell is going on, Nick Cage.
I watched this one not too long ago called Jiu-Jitsu, and it's kind of like Predator with ninjas, and Nick Cage plays this fallen mystic warrior, and it's just, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and if you go in realizing that it's absolutely ridiculous, you're gonna love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds insane. Like, it sounds dumb as heck, but it sounds like something that would be a lot of fun to watch with a couple of the buddies. Like, there's a number of movies, I call them 3 beer movies, where it's like, if you're on your 3rd pint, you will enjoy this film, but if you try to watch it sober, you're not gonna have a good time. Like, I watched Zoolander 2 a few years ago, and I was just by myself at home, but I had like a couple of beers, so just, watching movies and eating dinner, and it wasn't good, but after a couple of beers, I'm like, okay, I'm giggling at some of the jokes and stuff, so I didn't hate my experience, but I was acknowledging, like, this movie sucks, but if you had 2 beers, you're going to laugh at it.
Yep. All right, so we have come to the end of another episode. This is the part where we give a shout out to breweries that we think make exceptional beer. So, sticking with this style of beer, I've got 2, and it's funny because they're the 2 that are on this show today. One is Skeleton Park for this amber, and the other is Broadhead for their amber.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then for other beers in the pale ale family, I mean, I'm gonna say Nickelbrook for Equilibrium, their English ale. Yeah. Henderson's Best for their ESB is another good one. They don't make it anymore, but I wish they'd bring it back. Grain and Grit has one called Bob's Best Bitter, which was a fantastic English bitter. But, what about you? Who would you give shout-outs to?
One I really, really enjoy, the Vimy Red Ale from Vimy Brewing here in Ottawa. I think they won a gold medal for it. It's a killer red ale, super, like, roasty, dark malt, super smooth, like one of my go-tos. Great guys too. I've known them for years. Also, Flora Hall, they do their best bitter ale, which is one of their standard rotation, not rotations, one of the standard beers they have on tap, and it's just always fantastic. Those are 2 I really, really like. The Henderson's Best is always fantastic. And actually, I went down to Boston a few years ago for my birthday. Back in 2019, and a friend of mine I went down there with, she was from New Hampshire, and she brought this amber ale from, I think it's 603 Brewing in, what's the name of her town? Londonderry, New Hampshire. That's where she was from. And they had the amber, and it was the first beer I drank when I got into the States, because we went to the Airbnb, and it was real tasty, and I enjoyed it, and we drank many other beers that night, but give a shout out to those guys down in New Hampshire there. Yeah.
I'm originally from the States, and there are nothing but microbrews anymore. I mean, there's you can't throw a stone without hitting a small craft brewery, which is not a bad thing in my opinion.
No,
because same environment is up here. All the craft breweries are kind of in it to help each other win it. So
it's the best community, the best industry community. Because, everybody wants to sell their product and make money and have their business go well. But you're also, I remember from years before repping, I had run into other, sales reps for other breweries. And they'd be like, oh, Chris, have you been to so-and-so restaurant or so-and-so bar yet? Go check them out. Here's the owner's name. Hey, tell him I sent you. Go talk to him. Always giving each other tips, trying to help each other out. Because we just want to see that every place we go into, whether it's a liquor store, a beer store, or a bar or restaurant, just have the best stuff possible on tap, And if it's, one less domestic tap and one more craft beer tap, then everybody's winning there. and people are just going to get even better stuff available. And that's also why I like it the best, is because I just get to share, no matter what I'm selling or sharing people, I get to share just delicious beer with my friends, my family, the city I live in, the community. And it's like, hey, this tastes good. I want you to have it as well, so you can enjoy how much it tastes. And it's just, it's rewarding in that. And just, God, craft beer just rocks.
It does. I mean, yeah, the craft beer scene, all in all, is pretty fantastic. I mean, like any industry, there's always going to be some issues and things like that, which is why people like Ren from Beer Diversity exist.
Love her.
So yeah, she was actually her episode of my show drops this Saturday, which for anybody who's reviewing this would have been like 2 months ago.
Wait, you know what's great about, actually, I was chatting with Ren a little while ago, and I was talking to her, and like, hey, listen, this is the show that I do. It's not beer related. You don't have to talk about any of that stuff that usually, is your daily stuff. We're going to talk about movies. So we're going to actually have Ren at some point on our show as well. And I think we're going to be talking about The Matrix and recasting The Matrix, which would be pretty fun. So I'll have to chat with her and figure out a date for that. But she's pretty amped for that. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to have her on the show as well.
Ren's a fantastic human being. She's one of my favorite human beings on Twitter. She's doing God's work.
She's doing the Lord's work.
Yeah. For craft beer industry. I mean, she's fantastic, and she's a funny person just in general. Like,
oh yeah,
we sat down, and we had our conversation, and after we got done recording, I think we talked for 20 minutes afterwards, just bullshitting,
yeah.
which is great, which is fine for me because I like to talk to people about beer and beer related things. So hey,
absolutely, no, I love it too. I mean, one of the reasons I was excited, I was looking forward to this all week. To chat with you and be on the show, because I just love talking about craft beer. It's the thing I'm passionate about. It's what pays the rent. I love to drink. I mean, I'll have a glass of red wine or a cocktail once in a while, but I'm always looking at the beer list wherever I go, because I just love the taste, love to drink it.
Yep. All right, so in case people missed it earlier in the episode because they were too busy drinking their own beer while watching or listening to this, what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Cinema Swap. And that's one word. Yeah.
Available everywhere podcasts are available.
Yeah. Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever you listen to podcasts on, we have it there.
Awesome. And you are the starting next week?
Monday. Yeah.
So Monday will be what? The
9th.
The 9th of August. Starting Monday, the 9th of August, Chris will be the official rep for Broadhead Beer. Watch out. You might see him out there somewhere.
Hopefully. Oh yeah, I'll be out and about.
Unless he totally screws this job up in the first week and they can him,
Yeah. 3 months probation. Never really try to test that envelope.
All right. Well, hey, like I said, we've reached the end of the episode. So I'd like to thank anybody who ends up watching this on YouTube. If you like what you saw, please subscribe. Click the little bell if you want to be notified when new episodes come out.
Ding, ding.
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for a beer style you'd like us to talk about, please leave a comment below. I'm always looking for things to talk about. I'm always looking for beer styles to talk about. If people don't give me suggestions, I'm just going to come up with them, and they might not be that great. So, I'd like to thank Chris for being on the show, and I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.
Cheers.